From the Cronkite studios in downtown Phoenix, this is Cronkite News.
Good evening and welcome to this special edition of Cronkite News on Arizona PBS. I'm Cynthia Esqueda. Cronkite News is dedicated to covering the borderlands of Arizona. Tonight is a look at some of our top coverage on cross-border relations, immigration policy, and the intersection of different cultures in our state.
The Maricopa County Sheriff's Office recently held a graduation for a new class of detention officers, which included Spanish-speaking officers. Cronkite News reporter Edgardo Lozoya attended the ceremony and spoke with officials regarding their diversity efforts.
That my actions will reflect credit on myself and my agency. That my actions will reflect credit on myself and my agency.
Class 947 made a promise to respect and obey the rules and procedures of the Maricopa County Sheriff's Office. Valeria Cáceres, a graduate and Spanish-speaking officer, dreamed of joining the military but found that she preferred the Sheriff's Office instead.
I never really imagined myself here, and now that I am, I'm very happy, and I feel a sense of satisfaction in doing something new and making my family proud.
Being able to communicate with all members of Maricopa County is what the Sheriff's Office believes is important, according to Chief of Custody Barry Rosca.
We want to do the best job that we can in order to communicate with them effectively. And part of that is that talent that someone might have to be bilingual. We have to recognize and afford the opportunity for those that are limited English proficiency in order to understand the processes.
Currently, the Sheriff's Office has over 1,500 working detention officers. Of those 1,500, over 50% are white, not Hispanic, and 35% are Hispanic. With 16 new graduates, MCSO is looking to reach out to all communities in hopes of filling 251 spots in their department.
Officer Samantha.
But Cáceres admits some people have questioned her choice of profession with MCSO as a Latino.
I would say that if you think we're bad people, then you should join the force so you can see what we focus on and what our policies are. We work based off what our policies state. That means we can't do whatever we want.
It's really important as an organization that we are, one MCSO. It's not just one uniform or one person. It is a combination of everybody contributing to that one goal of community service to professionalism and dedication to a career field.
And part of that dedication, using bilingual skills to communicate with those who speak limited English.
There's satisfaction in helping your own people because we're the ones translating, and through that, there's an opportunity for less problems.
In Phoenix, Edgardo Lozoya, Cronkite News.
Meanwhile, there are many other undocumented migrants who are crossing into the United States and presenting themselves to Border Patrol seeking asylum. Within the last few weeks, Immigration and Customs Enforcement has been dropping off many of these migrant families in different locations throughout the state. Cronkite News reporter Cammie Clark went to Tucson, where one organization had no other choice but to turn a roadside motel into a shelter.
Many of the charities that normally step in and help in this kind of situation say they're overwhelmed by the number of migrants being dropped off by ICE authorities. Both of the men we spoke to asked that their full names not be used after just arriving to the motel, located on the south side of town. One room has been turned into a makeshift hospital. Here, they separate donated clothes depending on size and who it's for. And in this one, they make pupusas that are a staple of Central American food. This Tucson motel has been transformed into a welcome/processing center for hundreds of undocumented immigrants. Catholic Community Services rented the motel after its church facilities didn't have enough capacity. Now it's these rooms the migrants are calling home after surviving their journey into the United States.
Desde el primer día sentimos miedo. En camiones va sobrecargados uno tras otro y mucho peligro.
Most of the migrants staying at the motel are from Guatemala, and that includes many families with small children.
Ahora al venir acá y nos damos cuenta otra realidad porque ya con el GPS pues dicen que no tenemos permiso de trabajar.
Es muy duro, en primer lugar, dejar uno a su familia y emigrar para acá, lo que es los Estados Unidos. en primer lugar uno se encomienda primero a Dios y luego para poder ver si uno logra llegar.
The motel is staffed by volunteers as migrants continue to get dropped off every day. Tucson City Councilman Steve Kozachek has been collecting donations and says that the drop-offs are a coordinated political move by federal authorities.
Because it's great optics, it's a great narrative right at the beginning of an election cycle to say we are being overrun on the border by these illegals and we have to elect strong border candidates.
In the meantime, the migrants keep coming, risking it all, they say, because of criminal gangs, the domestic violence, and non-existent employment back home.
Cuando salí de Guatemala yo no tenía ningún centavo, ningún quetzal. Lo que hice fue hipotecar mi casa.
Uno se viene con la ilusión de trabajar, con la esperanza de sacar a la familia adelante y de que vamos a poder tener la oportunidad de un empleo, pero en la realidad se ve difícil.
Cronkite News specifically asked ICE about Councilman Kozachek's allegations. They did not respond to our question. They did say, however, they are simply abiding by the Flores Settlement Agreement, which requires federal authorities to release undocumented immigrant children in detention without unnecessary delays. From the Broadcast Center, Cammie Clark, Cronkite News.
In Pima County, the debate concerning a federal grant for border security is far from over. Cronkite News reporter Abdel Jimenez is tracking the story. Abdel?
Thank you, Bryce. Earlier this month, the Pima County Board of Supervisors rejected a $1 million grant. The decision comes at the heels of a public outcry over how those funds were being managed. I traveled to Tucson to see what happens now.
Politics and public safety should not intersect one another.
However, the two topics continued to create debate after the Pima County Board voted against a $1.4 million federal grant known as Operation Stone Garden, aimed at providing resources for border patrolling. Now, Pima County Sheriff Mark Napier has to find another way to get funding.
I'd so much rather spend the money the federal government was nearly begging me to take to add public safety to my county than to have that on the backs of the taxpayers.
The Sheriff's Department has already used about half the grant to pay for things like overtime and equipment. Meanwhile, Richard Elias is one of the board members who voted against it back on September 4th. He says his decision was based on concerns over the recent cases of family separations at the border and the public outcry over the perception that the sheriff was cooperating with federal law enforcement.
I think our sheriffs should be patrolling Pima County streets and protecting Pima County residents as opposed to doing immigration enforcement.
Napier disagrees.
We do not have federal immigration enforcement power, period.
We are a community that does not stand for this type of funding to go into our community to dehumanize our people.
The debate has rippled into local politics in Pima County, generating strong backlash from residents. Despite losing this grant, Sheriff Napier says his department will continue to focus on providing safety and security near the border, aside from the political back and forth.
So we need to separate all this rhetoric and all this heated language and all this divisiveness and really look at this a very realistic and pragmatic view. This is about public safety, it's about national security, it's about human rights.
All activities surrounding Operation Stone Garden will cease within the next 2 weeks. In the Broadcast Center, Abdel Jimenez, Cronkite News.
Hundreds of thousands of immigrants in the United States are sighing with relief today after a judge stopped a federal order that removed their protected status. This included migrants from countries like Sudan, Haiti, Nicaragua, and El Salvador. Cronkite News reporter Edgardo Lozoya spoke with one Salvadoran mother in the Valley who says her family has been given a second chance.
We didn't know what was going to happen. Not just with us, but with our kids as well.
It's been 10 months of uncertainty and anxiousness for Melanie Novato and her children, but a federal judge's decision Wednesday evening has brought a glimmer of hope to this Arizona family.
Definitely relieved. Now I feel like I can actually plan stuff, even a future for our kids, because that was even uncertain.
Uncertain after the Trump administration announced early this year it was halting temporary protected status for over 300,000 immigrants nationwide starting in November. Last night, a California federal judge stopped that order.
For all of us that have kids here, we didn't know what was going to happen with them, whether we would have to go back to our countries. I'm from El Salvador, so we would have to take all of our kids to our countries, and that was definitely a very scary thought.
Salvadorans are the biggest group with TPS in Arizona, with about 1,000 of them having this status, which allows holders to renew their work permit every 18 months. Part of District Judge Edward Chen's decision specified the Trump administration's decision to end TPS was based, in part, on animus against non-white, non-European immigrants. For this Avondale family, the judge's decision means they get to stay in the only place they've called home, something especially meaningful for Melanie's 14-year-old daughter.
She feels like she can move on now. She told me last night she felt like she can move on and actually think of the future versus not being stressed out about our situation.
In Goodyear, Edgardo Lozoya, Cronkite News.
The judge's order is effective immediately. However, the next hearing in this case is scheduled for October 26th, with the government saying it does plan to appeal this decision.
Immigrants who use public assistance could find it harder to obtain a green card under new rules being proposed by the Trump administration, potentially affecting millions of families who use public federal programs like food stamps, Medicaid, and public housing. Cronkite News reporter Abdel Jimenez tells us more about this public charge policy and who could be affected.
They are basically increasing the definition of public charge, and those that are going to be most affected are those immigrant families who live under the poverty guideline.
Reaction to the Trump administration's public charge announcement over the weekend has been swift in Phoenix. Lucha, a pro-immigrant advocacy group, says the latest move by the Department of Homeland Security is just a scare tactic for people trying to get permanent residency.
But in reality, it's very specific to folks who are trying to apply for residency. So this is not specifically for folks who are already residents. This is for people who are in the process or applying for a U.S. permanent residency.
When contacted, local DHS authorities referred Cronkite News to a press release, which reads in part, quote, "This proposed rule would implement a law passed by Congress intended to promote immigrant self-sufficiency and protect finite resources by ensuring that they are not likely to become burdens on American taxpayers." End quote. Phoenix immigration attorney Rafael Tirado says these proposed new rules could make people shy away from ever attempting to get a green card.
Most clients rely on food stamps, and my clients are basically poor clients. So lots of people are going to need to find probably an affidavit or a sponsor for the applications.
In Phoenix, Abdel Jimenez, Cronkite News.
The administration is expected to formally publish the draft rule today in the Federal Register. That will open a 60-day period for public comment, which the administration will review and potentially revise. The final version will probably come out in a matter of months and will go into effect 60 days after it's published.
The border town of Naco, Arizona is once again dealing with a burst pipeline that's spilling 300 gallons of sewage every minute coming from the Mexican side. Now officials are looking for permanent solutions under difficult circumstances. Cronkite News reporter Brittany Watson went to Naco and shows us what they're dealing with.
Thousands of gallons of raw sewage are spilling into Naco, Arizona from Naco, Sonora every day, leaving residents wondering when this pipeline will be getting repaired and what health effects they may be facing because of it.
We have every right to defend our lives. You guys don't live here. We live here.
Hepatitis A, hepatitis B, tetanus. We also worry about viruses and parasites as well.
Cochise County health officials hosted a town hall last Friday in Naco for residents, allowing them to express their frustrations about the leaking pipeline while discussing the plans to fix it. Authorities estimate repairs will last around 8 weeks.
So that's kind of an estimated time that we've been given. We don't know which agency is going to be responsible for that at all.
The leak started September 9th, but Naco has been dealing with spilled sewage for years. This latest incident triggered after a breach in a conveyance line used to transfer sewage from both sides of the border.
I'd like to tell the council for them to get together and do what's got to be done on the American side, and let them worry about the Mexican side.
County officials say there is a plan in place for repairs, but it comes with challenges.
We're kind of on standby right now because when that repair takes place, we're anticipating another flow to come across because they have to flush out the system.
Naco resident David Lloyd believes the answer to preventing this problem from happening again is to improve relations between the governments across the border.
Naco, Sonora and Naco, Arizona are very much the same community in some ways.
extraordinarily, and we should take advantage of that, and we should use it positively.
In Naco, Brittany Watson, Cronkite News.
While authorities finalize repair plans, the first of several vaccination clinics set up by Cochise County health officials for Naco residents will be taking place this coming Friday.
A trans-border pipeline that brings wastewater from Mexico to the U.S. is nearly 70 years old, in need of repairs, and causing problems at the water treatment plant. Back in the 1940s, the U.S. and Mexico agreed to treat the sewage here to U.S. standards. I traveled to the border to see the problems. When Marilyn French St. George retired with her husband to Green Valley, Arizona, water quality wasn't top of mind. But that's changed.
Communities like mine that are out in the suburbs are not in the loop of the reclamation system up in Tucson. We may be left out to dry.
That worry brought her to a packed public meeting in Tubac on the health of the Santa Cruz River.
It's coming from Mexico and Nogales, Arizona.
This is one supply of the river's lifeblood, a wastewater treatment plant in Rio Rico, Arizona. 14 million gallons of wastewater are treated here every day, adding up to more than 5 billion gallons a year. The water travels through the International Outfall Interceptor sewage pipeline. Construction first began nearly 70 years ago. We're along the U.S.-Mexico border, and just across the street is where the IOI pipe starts. It then travels 9 miles north, where the raw sewage is treated. Then, the wastewater is sent into the Santa Cruz River. Last July, the pipe broke, spewing millions of gallons of raw sewage and toxic heavy metals into streams that feed the Santa Cruz River. That section of pipe has been fixed, but the entire pipe needs long-standing repairs. There are plans to line the pipe with fabric coated in special resin. The cost, almost $25 million. Most of that money would come from federal funds, but Arizona has to come up with nearly $5 million. This is where raw sewage waste ends up. This is one of the last ponds before the liquids and solids are separated, and the solids are sent to a landfill. It takes 12 hours of processing before this water goes into the river, according to the assistant plant manager who gave us a tour.
There's bacteria and microorganisms there that eat organics. Basically, they eat the sewage that comes in the water.
Those bacteria struggle to survive when metals like nickel, copper, and zinc are present. Earlier this year, a spike in zinc in the wastewater caused concerns.
So the levels were high enough to impair the operational efficiency of the plant, specifically the microbiology.
Glycerin helps keep the microbes active when water toxicity gets too high. If the bacteria dies off, ammonia could end up in the river. Even though the hazards are high, the water is worth a lot to Arizona. $2.1 million every year. Without it, the river could shrink from 18 to only 6 miles in Santa Cruz County, leaving residents like Marilyn French St. George dry.
I'm of an age where I don't want to be moving in my 80s because there's no water. Or the value of my home is diminished considerably because of poorer water quality.
As for taking care of the metals in the water, officials are looking for options to either certify labs in Mexico to test and monitor metal levels there. Otherwise, a U.S. lab may have to step up and support the effort to ensure compliance. The local funds to repair the pipe still aren't available.
The border town of Naco is still dealing with a pipeline that's been spilling raw sewage for weeks. And as officials try to figure out a way to solve the problem, several efforts are being made to keep people safe, including a free vaccination clinic. Cronkite News reporter Brittany Watson was there.
Garbage and sewage continues to pile up right at the border, separating Naco, Arizona and Naco, Sonora, leaving residents worried and health officials doing what they can to keep citizens as safe as possible.
At any time we have raw sewage into a community area, we want to take preventive steps.
Steps like this vaccination clinic aimed at curbing the potential effects of this pipeline, which has been leaking raw sewage, with authorities declaring a state of emergency back on September 9th. Community leaders gathered at the Naco fire station answering questions, addressing concerns, and vaccinating residents, while also doing house calls. Francisco and Lydia Romo weren't able to physically attend the clinic, but they're still getting their shots.
I'm at home at all times because of her. She is unable to move, so I have to be here for her.
The Romos are getting protected from a spill that's been happening on and off, but this is the first time it's flowed into residential areas.
With consistent flows roughly quarterly that can range anywhere from a couple of weeks to 4 or 5 months.
A sole source water aquifer provides water to Naco, Arizona, Naco, Sonora, and is pumped to residents in Bisbee. So the health concern here is how much of this sewage could potentially make its way through the soil and pollute the groundwater supply. Several lab tests are being done, checking for E. coli, fecal coliforms, nitrates and nitrites, heavy metals, volatile organics, and more. Officials say plans for temporary repairs are underway, but they're looking for a permanent solution involving governments from both sides of the border.
To fix it completely is the responsibility of Mexico. The Mexican authorities and the water system in Mexico, it is ultimately their responsibility to manage their sewage flows.
In Naco, Brittany Watson, Cronkite News.
There will also be a children's vaccination clinic on October 12th as officials await the results of the lab test. Local officials in Cochise County say they need state and federal authorities to work with their Mexican counterparts to fix this leaking pipeline permanently.
So what does this new trade deal mean for Arizona? Cronkite News reporter Abdel Jimenez talked with economic leaders here in the Valley.
This new trade deal has more to offer than just a change in name. State financial leaders say several industries here will be able to tap into the economic benefits, as well as preventing a potential crisis for Arizona with Canada. The impact of the new trade deal between the U.S., Mexico, and Canada is wide-ranging. Arizona leaders say this pact will help local businesses continue to work and strengthen the relationship with both our neighbors to the north and south.
This agreement doubles the amount that we could send into Mexico without any sort of regulatory barriers.
Arizona Hispanic Chamber of Commerce Vice President Monica Villalobos says the aviation industry is popular for Hispanic business owners within the state, and it's one area she says will see direct benefits.
Manufacturing is going to be the area for Hispanic businesses that is impacted the most by this agreement. As I said, perhaps not as much on the auto side, but certainly on the aviation side.
Agriculture is another of Arizona's biggest industries, and one sector that will be directly impacted by this new trade deal. Some business owners say they're excited by the agreement and the possibilities it may bring.
I'm just very pleased. As a Southern Arizona businessman, I'm very, very pleased with how things have come out, and we're very encouraged going forward. And you'll start to see a lot more direct foreign investment.
Despite this kind of optimism surrounding the new deal, it can't be signed just yet. There is a 60-day review period in Congress during which representatives can suggest revisions. In the Broadcast Center, Abdel Jimenez, Cronkite News.
Candidates for Phoenix mayor came together last night in a gathering to promote diversity and unity in the city. Cronkite News reporter Edgardo Lozoya got an inside scoop as to what drove this conversation.
And before you can start handling some of these complex problems that we're all talking about here, you need to be brilliant at the basics.
3 of the 4 candidates for Phoenix mayor participated in what was dubbed a conversation rather than a debate Thursday night. The gathering put together by the Coalition One community made up of individuals and businesses that support inclusion and equality for all Arizonans.
It really gives the candidates an opportunity to talk to really the diverse constituency that makes Phoenix great.
Organizers say the goal behind this conversation format is to hopefully motivate Phoenix residents to open up more and discuss all types of issues with the candidates.
As a part of the minority group in the city of Phoenix, I want to make sure that my next mayor can address issues that, are things that affect my family.
Issues like safer schools, homelessness, refugees in Phoenix, and education were just some of the topics covered during this conversation. With 4 different visions, the candidates for mayor of Phoenix have one common goal: a more unified Phoenix. Another important topic that was discussed was sexual harassment in the workforce. All 3 candidates agree that there should be zero tolerance for this type of behavior.
They're not doing enough. They're not.
If we sit and listen to them talk about the issues that affect us, the constituents, then we're gonna be able to get the issues resolved faster.
In Phoenix, Edgardo Lozoya, Cronkite News.
In honor of Hispanic Heritage Month, an Arizona library is hosting an art exhibit that's breaking down borders. Cronkite News reporter Brittany Watson headed west to show us how artists from Arizona and Mexico are coming together.
Paintings, sculptures, drawings, and unexpected surfaces serving as canvas. Artwork that's united two towns despite being physically separated by a border fence. The San Luis Library is hosting their 5th annual art exhibition called Origins, and the theme is Art Without Borders, all part of celebrating Hispanic Heritage Month.
Bringing them together from Yuma, from San Luis, from across the border.
It's the first year the San Luis Library is collaborating with Mexican organizations, incorporating art from across the border. Melissa Huerta, curator and director at Museo Regional, makes that connection.
Being the bridge between the talent and the institution is like, if you're not an artist, you feel as if you're part of that exhibition and the art, even if you don't have a piece.
The colorful artwork exhibited shows there's no boundaries to what these artists can do, no matter from what side of the border they come from.
To me, it's very interesting to see the art, to see the different styles, and to see the different creations when people become creative.
This exhibit allows artists of all ages and experience levels to showcase their work.
Ariana Viega, a student artist featured in the exhibit, sees this as a way for people to learn more about Hispanic traditions.
Most of the artwork is about like Mexican heritage or Mexican people, and so it lets other people that aren't known with the culture to come and like see different point of views.
In San Luis, Yuma, Brittany Watson, Cronkite News.
The exhibit is currently open and free to the public and will run through October 15th.